Nah, I'm just kidding. Ladies and gentlemen, if you missed it, Stubby Hammerers is no more, which is kind of funny because it was like only really a thing for like a month and change, however long the set's been out, because you can run Stubby Hammerers in Fi. By the way, if you didn't know, Fi is pretty popular, or well, it's probably still pretty popular. And it was popular because you could basically just pop off like crazy from just about any point in the game, including right at the beginning of the game. And because you could pop off like crazy, things felt, we'll just put interesting as the term. Now, I do want to point this out. I want to very much point this out. The idea that Fi was immediately just going to be degenerate and like chain levels of like, you know, superiority or even Starvo levels of like unplayability into it is a bit of a farce. And it's a farce because the deck itself did have some play into it. It had counterplay into it. If you are ice reacting as Oldhim, if you are playing disruption cards with on-hit effects as Bravo, like, you know, coming across with crush effects, asking, you know, for cards from Fi so that you don't, as the Fi player, don't just immediately just like not have a turn, or having just no turn because you've given those cards away, is that counterplay. So decks like Bravo that can present crush effects, or Icelander that can provide some disruption on their turn, or Lexi with on-hit disruption effects, those sorts of things, that is the counterplay that was available and is available in this meta. And it stands to reason that this meta is perhaps the most diverse that we've seen. You know, you take away Chain and Starvo, and all of a sudden this meta is like super wide open. And unfortunately, Prism only 2 points away, which is kind of hilarious. 2 points away from the living legend herself. You take that away, and this meta just gets really, really interesting. And so with all that saying, I don't think Fi is, even with Stubby Hammerers, at that crazy peak level of power. Is one of these scenarios where, yes, the deck was very good as it was, and honestly I think is still going to be very good going forward, and still should be played because it is an incredible aggro hero, even without, you know, a simple piece of arm equipment. Heck, there were people that were running Shuko in place of Stubby Hammerers and still doing really well, and you can do that and still do really well. That being said, the move away from Stubby Hammerers is a smart thing, and I'll talk about why. So even though we are in a meta that is incredibly diverse, and the, you know, the removal of Stubby Hammerers isn't, like, I would say the most necessary thing in the world, I think it is a welcome change because it provides for exactly one hero as a generic equipment piece more value than a single card should provide. In a way, it's kind of like allowing you to set up an end game as Chain, but as early as turn 2 for Fi. Because, and this is what the combo was, as you know, it stood. If you found your hand with like a Spreading Flames, or if maybe you arsenaled a Spreading Flames plus an Art of War, or if you drew into double Art of War, or if you have like Belittle, Minnowism, Art of War, basically any combination of like a very powerful set of cards that you can easily set up if you find one, arsenal it and pass, and then take a bunch of damage, you can just pop off for like 30 to 40 damage. So you can present lethal as early as turn 2, and it's for that reason, you know, allowing you to come with Stubby Hammerers, then Art of War for another +1. It's for that reason that we saw bans and restrictions and suspensions in Blitz on Kano. So for the same exact reasons of the game in Blitz was too fast and not as interactive, for that reason they chose to remove Stir and Snapback. I think for the same exact reason they're choosing to remove Stubby Hammerers from Classic Constructed, because here's a hero that's basically doing what Kano could do in Classic Constructed, and technically there's less play into it in a certain way, and it's more consistent in another certain way than what Kano can do in the same format, or even in Blitz. It's really interesting to look at the parallel between Fi and Kano and what the OTK essentially was presenting. and just saying, well, okay, so as Kano, when you present that amount of damage, they can pitch into it for, Arcane Barrier and try to stop it there, or they have a couple of cards now that have, abilities to stop it, like Oasis Respite. But all of a sudden, for Fi, you just have to give up your hand and you probably still die. So it's like, there's like a lot of the similarities in my mind as someone who plays a lot of Kano, looking at what Fi was able to present, because you can give away your whole hand and then still take like 30 damage or 20, 25 damage. And again, this was because you would basically look for any combination of Art of War, Spreading Flames. When you find those, plus a couple of other cards or a card that allows you to pitch for blue, then you would just Stubby Hammers, Art of War, banish, draw 2, +1 across the board, draw into new cards, find maybe another, set of card draw, or, another Spreading Flames, something to that effect, or just value like 0 for 3s or 0 for 4s like Blaze Headlong. You just find any of that, and then Stubby Hammers, if you go wide enough, basically just becomes another copy of Art of War for free that you can activate at any time. Period. End of story. That applies to your deck because most of the things in your deck look to push that amount of damage, right? So Stubby Hammers basically just ends up becoming Art of War on demand. And that is a very powerful thing, and it's one thing that I think it's worth removing from the format. It was already removed for Blitz, and so removing it from the format here makes a ton of sense. If you wanted to know, they break down their exact reasoning, and it kind of says the same thing. Stubby Hammers allows you to present the equivalent of 15% of a hero's life total, just the single card. I liken it more to the amount of damage that it can produce is about the same as what an Art of War does. And a card that is essentially Art of War on a piece of equipment, while interesting, that is an interesting idea and an interesting design choice in exactly like this type of hero, is just really disgustingly powerful. I do also want to point out, and they point out, that look at the meta that we're in. This is why I think it was to some degree a little unnecessary to ban this card, because the meta as it is, or as it was very diverse. But I am going to say this. If you watched any of the gameplay from any of the Road to Nationals, or if you participated in Road to Nationals and you watched Fi go off turn 2, or just Fi present, whatever, just present this damage, it is incredibly, alluring as a player that wants to win games to just pivot to that. Right? Especially if it's sort of uninteractable and unpreventable to a certain degree. You just kind of win the game if you can pop off with this kind of turn. Because of that, if they didn't make a move, we might start to see this number right here trend upwards and upwards and upwards. And even though it may not be the best hero, you may start to see the meta distill into Fi, and then whatever people think can beat Fi. And that is not an engaging meta, and that's not a meta that we necessarily want. And now, is there a way to really stop a player base from doing that? Perhaps not. But if you're looking at this and you're going, well, one, the card itself is unfun or just a little overtuned, because it allows you to basically Art of War across an entire board. And two, it has a chance of just continuing to make this rise in power level and optimization, and then pull people in to play that. We can get another situation where everyone kind of focuses on one deck, and then whatever can beat that deck. So why not just take the card away completely, as we did in Blitz? So it makes some sense there. Do I love the ban? Honestly, I don't love bans in general, and there's a lot of people that are like, why are you loving on bans? I like when a company moves to make their game better, or the gameplay better. I prefer that. I would prefer a movement to improve a gameplay experience than no movement at all. Okay, because then if the game is unfun, you have problems. Now, I prefer it to happen in a conscientious way and in a way that's very thoughtful of the player base, but I would prefer a movement done versus no movement at all. Now, with this ban, my next question becomes this. Does Fi suffer greatly and fall off because they don't have access to Stubby Hammers? I don't think so, because people are already running Shuko. Shuko's already really good and just presents a lot of like little awkward amounts of damage, like over the top. You know, you play like a Phoenix Flame that's innocuous like some point during the turn, and then all of a sudden you play like Lava Burst, you know, and Lava Burst is a base 2, so Shuko, you know, if Lava Burst is the second 2, Shuko gives it a buff, and then all of a sudden Lava Burst is not coming for 5, it's coming for 6, and after you've already presented a bunch of damage, that can just be really awkward and really dangerous. So for me, I don't think Fi even really falls off that much. I think the deck is still really good. I think you still look for Art of War turns, you still look for Spreading Flames turns, you still go super wide, and you just benefit from an equipment that gives a +1 buff and blocks 2. Like, that's really good still. So does this hurt the hero that much? No. What it does is improve the gameplay experience into that hero and take away a possible disgusting you know, kill that can come out of nowhere. So like I said, I am in favor of stuff like this happening because it is for the benefit of the players. And so I'm kind of pumped with this. This is kind of a weird statement. We're happy that Fi got to have a full season of competitive OP with Stubbies and the calling Utrecht, I don't know if that's how you pronounce that, weekend stands as a record of what an optimized Fi deck could do with the innocuous little equipment. I get that, and I think to me this goes back to like, yes, it's fun to design these cards from a design perspective. It's fun to like print this sort of thing, and then like kind of watch, you know, we printed this a full year and plus ago in a previous set, and it doesn't do anything, and then all of a sudden, poof, now it's meta relevant. I think from like a design perspective, that's a cool thing to experience. And perhaps it's also cool to discover as well, because what's the next, you know, innocuous piece of equipment that just pops out of nowhere and then like does something big for a hero? I don't know. That's what's interesting to think about. So I can see from their perspective why they would make a statement like this. If you wanted to ask me which equipment is going to be really good, I think it's the Spellfire Cloak in Blitz as Kano. It just does what you want. Like, it's better all of a sudden than like Tunic. Unless you're playing like a long matchup, then maybe Tunic's better. But like Spellfire Cloak all of a sudden is just like really good. That sort of thing with regards to design is super interesting. So it's an interesting ban, it's an interesting announcement, and it's sort of a new step forward perhaps to a certain degree, because they're dropping this after an RTN season and just like without an announcement like we're gonna make a ban, we're gonna post one of these announcements coming up. They've already talked about them having like, you know, normal cadenced banned and suspended announcement where they you know, release it every set. This one's an interesting one because they saw the problem and they were like, we're not just going to let it be there, and we're going to do something about it so it doesn't create an unfun atmosphere in the long run. So we're just going to remove it. So that is an interesting new step that they are kind of taking. So what are your takes on this banned and suspended announcement? Do you think it even matters? Do you think it was unnecessary in general because of the meta and possible counters? Or do you think it's good because it makes for a more interesting matchup into Fi when you know you're not going to just get 40'd on turn 2? Let me know in a comment below, and look at that. Look at that, one person? Can you believe that? Look, one person is going to make that number go into the 100 left. That's kind of exciting. As always, thanks for watching.